Hello everybody, Bogdan here and welcome to the Import-Export Hub channel. So in this video I will be talking about 5 products that are worth importing from France, and for this I've prepared some boring Excel sheets, and I really hope that you will bear with me as long as you can, guys. But before I start, don't hesitate to hit the like and the subscribe buttons, because hitting them will translate into long-lasting benefits for your index fingernails. Joke aside, guys, let's start this video and let me introduce the first product, which is what else? Wine, of course. And we see here that in 2020 France exported more than $6.3 billion worth of bottled wine. And to put the figures into perspective, this 5-year export trend really helps us understand how important is the wine sector in France's export activity and economy. And just for the sake of it, the total exports of the Republic of Georgia and Albania combined in 2020 are less than $6 billion. And for me at least, the values here are absolutely astonishing. Anyway, let's move forward and see who are the main trading partners. And we see that the United States is the main export destination for the French wines, followed by the United Kingdom, and on the third place we have Hong Kong. In terms of year-on-year relative changes, the export shrunk with 6%, and it's somehow counterintuitive. If you think about it, as from, I don't know, March 2020, with all the lockdowns, social distancing and so on, people stayed much more at home, and thus were prone to consume larger quantities of alcohol, wine in this case. Or at least this is what I was doing back in 2020, and I might wrongly extrapolate with what is happening with the French export of wines. But then again, the hotels, restaurants and bars were mostly closed in 2020, and that's why there is this 6% decrease compared to 2019. And most probably the volumes absorbed by in-house consumption, if you want, were lower than the volumes otherwise absorbed by the restaurants and hotels, hence the 6% decrease. Anyway, we see that the biggest decrease was in relation with the United States, whose imports from France fell with 23%, with China, who had a 19% decrease, and Japan with 6% decrease. There is also 1% decrease with Germany, close to $4.5 billion, but compared with the figures in this top 10 partner list, it's quite negligible if you ask me. On the other hand, the biggest year-on-year increases were with Canada, the United Kingdom and the Netherlands, who had a 7% increase in relative terms and more than $21 million in absolute terms. And looking at these top 10 trading partners, I see that almost all of them except China are highly developed countries with high purchasing power, and thus, from my opinion, able to absorb those large import volumes. And this is not, of course, an indication that only developed countries with, I don't know, high purchasing power population can import the French wines, but for me at least, there is clear that there is a strong positive correlation between the exported values of French wines and economic development. And I am really wondering how the export managers working for big winemakers in the export department try to find new export destination. I'm really curious at what kind of indicators they are looking at in order to make their pricing strategy and so on. And I bet it's really interesting. And if by chance somebody working in the wine industry watches this video, I will highly appreciate some insights from you guys. Now let's move to the next product, and my second recommendation is beauty and makeup preparations. And don't you laugh, I know this is not necessarily a manly product to recommend, but we are talking here about potential business opportunities, so please hear me out. So we have the total exported value at more than $7.5 billion in 2020, which had an 8% decrease compared to 2019, which is understandable. People stayed much more at home and didn't need to rejuvenate their cheeks and moisturize their skin as often. And if you were, I don't know, lazy and didn't have the time to put your makeup before the meeting, the Zoom meeting began by saying that the camera somehow doesn't work that day. Again, it's understandable. So don't you feel bad about it? And looking at the last 5 years, we see some increases starting with 2016 until 2019, especially in the Asian and Southeast Asian region, more precisely in China, Singapore, Hong Kong, or South Korea. And if you ask me, these are some of the countries that the major brands are focusing for quite some years now. And as that part of the world has really great export potential. Again, this is my humble opinion, but if I were a big European or, I don't know, American makeup manufacturer, for sure I will try to address and capture as much market share as possible from that part of the globe. Now, in terms of year-on-year changes, the colors again speak for themselves. Lots of red, so the volume decreased, with South Korea, Spain, the United Kingdom having the biggest relative decreases, while China had more than 17% increase and Hong Kong 39% increase. So again, we see that the effects of the pandemic affected also the makeup sector in France. Now moving on to my third recommendation, of course I couldn't miss the wallets and purses sector, as France along with Italy, Spain and the United Kingdom are well-renowned manufacturing and exporting countries. And for this particular sector, so HS code 420231, the total exports in 2020 were at around $1.1 billion, and as the case with the other sectors suffered a decrease, this time is bigger, 13% to be precisely in relative terms. The biggest export markets were China, we have Singapore on the second place and Japan on the third one. Just to cover the top three trading partners. And in terms of year-on-year changes, we see that the biggest decreases in relative value were in relation to Hong Kong, the United States and South Korea, while in terms of increased values in in the export flow, again in relative terms, we have China with almost 60% increase, and Taiwan with almost 39% increase. We see again that the distribution of France's exports is quite dispersed, covering developed countries with high purchasing power, and it's quite good for the French manufacturers and exporters, as they are somehow minimizing the risk of overexposure to a particular group of countries when the demand or the market goes down. And imagine how would this have translated if, I don't know, China and Taiwan were also markets that experienced low demand in 2020. And my guess is that the French manufacturing companies and exporting companies from this sector will have had no other option but either to reduce the production capacity or, even worse, to lay off people. Anyway, let's not overanalyze the what ifs and move on to my fourth recommendation, which is perfumes and toilet waters. as we need to give some nice perfume to this video. And as you can see here in the table, France is the biggest exporter of perfumes, and the figures don't lie. We have more than $4 billion worth of exports in 2020. Unfortunately, with some quite high decrease in relative terms, almost 23%. And if you ask me, the figure is rather high, but fortunately this industry is not that much labor intensive, and I think that in terms of number of laid off people, the figures are not that high. And I was speaking earlier about the relatively high decrease, and we see that here that the biggest decreases in terms of exported values were in relation to Italy, Germany, and Spain. Again, just to cover the top three ones. Fortunately, there were some increased exported values towards Belgium, the Netherlands, and the biggest one of about 125% with China. So once again, not putting all your eggs in one basket seems to be the winning strategy in times of crisis, and not only. And by now, of course, if you are still watching this video, you should probably ask yourselves, why is China highlighted in yellow? Bear with me, guys. Let's move to my fifth and the last recommendation, and I will tell you in a sec. And my final recommendation is related to eye makeup preparations, so HS code 330420, and compared to the other four products, the exported volumes from this sector are quite low. If you can say that almost $450 million worth of exports is low. In terms of year-on-year changes, we see that almost all top 10 trading partners had a decrease, with Spain, Singapore, and the Russian Federation having the biggest relative decreases, from an overall sector that shrunk year-on-year with almost 21%. So again, quite a big contraction relative to 2019. But as you can see here, we have China that somehow sweetened the bitter decrease in this sector and registered almost 22% increase in relative terms. Again, as in the case with the previous four products presented earlier, the pandemic, the lockdowns, the social distancing had a major cause in generating these year-on-year changes compared with 2019. So there you are, guys. These are my 5 recommendations, and I think I can draw some conclusion. And the first one is related to China's importance in France's exports, and I dare to say that this is the case with all major European countries and exporters, and that's why I've highlighted China in all my 5 Excel sheets. Not necessarily because it's that China is in these top 10 trading partners, but because except wine, China, along with Hong Kong and Taiwan, had the largest increases in terms of relative value, and I dare to say crucially helped lots of companies who are working directly or indirectly in these 5 industries. And I'm sure of that this is not strictly related to only those 5 industries. My second conclusion is that China, despite being considered the manufacturer of the world, in the last years, China became the epicenter, if you want, of growth in terms of imports from Europe and elsewhere. So if you are a well-established brand and want to grow, you shouldn't ignore China's huge market potential. Also, you can make from China or Hong Kong or Taiwan the gateway to other countries in the region who have also a lot of growing potential. Anyway, for me at least, the takeaway message from these two conclusions is to start considering China as a partner if you want to expand and grow your business. Again, don't put your eggs in one basket. As long as you don't disturb the Chinese authorities, there can be a mutual benefit relationship. On the other hand, if you are lucky enough to be in a country that has some political tensions with China, then you are in trouble, guys. And it comes to mind the taxes that China imposed on Australian wines earlier this year. And frankly, I wouldn't want to be in the shoes of the Australian winemakers or the Australian Foreign Trade Minister. And with all this being said, I think my time is up. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to comment and hit the like and the subscribe buttons. And until next time, keep your business safe. Thanks.